1, 2, 3. Oi gente, aqui é a Bruna, bem-vindos a mais uma live aqui do canal e hoje eu tô acompanhada pela linda, maravilhosa Kimberly Bradley, autora de A Guerra que Salvou a Minha Vida e de A Guerra que Me Ensinou a Viver. Esse é o lançamento de fevereiro da Dark Side e a Kim vai estar aqui para responder algumas perguntas com a gente. Muito empolgada, muito nervosa, não reparem. E como que vai funcionar? Eu vou estar conversando com a Kim em inglês, ela mora nos Estados Unidos, ela vai já se apresentar um pouquinho para vocês. E a Tassi vai estar aqui no chat conversando com vocês em português, ela vai traduzir o que a Kim falar para o português. Quem não conseguir acompanhar em inglês, pode ficar de olho no chat, que vai estar todas as informações, todos os detalhes por lá. E vocês já devem ter visto que o Fog está aqui no chat, ajudando a falar com vocês, a manter essa comunicação e essa live funcionar o melhor possível. Aqui na tela, vocês vão ver que tem alguns comandos que vocês podem usar. Qualquer dúvida, é só mandar aí no chat. E o Fog está de olho. Prontos? Então, vamos começar. Kim, welcome once again, and I'm so excited to have you here. I said that to you already, but I'd like you to introduce you a little bit, talk a little bit about yourself and your book, and whatever you want.
Okay, so my name is Kim Bradley. I live in Bristol, Tennessee in the United States, and this is the English copy of my book, The War That I Finally Won, which in your version is The War That Taught Me How to Live.
Yes.
Which I love that title, actually. I thought that was a neat change. And this is my 17th published book. It's the sequel to The War That Saved My Life, which in the United States was a Newbery Honor book, which is a pretty nice award.
Yes.
So I have been thrilled to see the international editions of both books come out. And in fact, I think, aside from England, you are the second one that's actually in print now of The War I Finally Won. So I'm really pleased about it. I'm very proud of these two books. They're the first time I did an actual sequel, and really happy with the reception they've gotten.
That's awesome. The first question I have to you is focused on Ada. So on the first book, Ada was filled with emotions. She had a constant fear of her mother and her mother finding her and taking her back to London, the insecurity and lack of self-esteem that caused because of the clubfoot, and the responsibility she felt towards Jamie, not to mention the war that was happening. And in book 2, I feel that she has to learn how to just live, to just be a 12-year-old girl. So how was it to develop her as a character? As a character, she has to develop and grow and be more mature, but in some place, she also had to step down a little bit and just relax and be more calm and a 12-year-old girl.
Be the child, sure. So in the very beginning of this book, the first book, I actually have a clue that I meant to write 2 books all along. And on page 3,
Really?
It says, the story I'm telling starts out 4 years ago at the beginning of the summer of 1939. And this book only goes through the end of the summer of 1940. It's this book that goes to the summer of 1943. So this is the one that completes the story. In my mind, it was always 2 stories. But having said that, it was really hard to write this book. And the thing is, you had to realize that in this book, Ada moves from a place of real insecurity and danger.
A really dark
to a
place,
of
right?
Relative safety. And then in this book, she starts to understand that and feel that she's healed and she can move on. And so it was hard to, I knew what I wanted to do, but it was hard to physically do it in this book at first. So we wrote and wrote. I ended up with 9 full drafts, which is a new record for me.
I remember when we last spoke, you were just finishing the drafts. You were just finished handing out the second book.
9. Too many. But not too many, because that's what it took. And I would much rather have a good book that takes a long time than a bad book that I can write quickly. Yes. I could write bad books really fast.
Well, I'm glad you took your time to write this one.
Yeah.
Something that I could notice while I was reading The War That I Finally Won was that the mother figure was well developed in and introduced in many shapes and contexts. We see a lot of different figures and a lot of backgrounds to those figures. Was it a active choice of yours, or did it happen naturally to just talk about the role of a mother or what it means to be a good mother? As I think that's a big discussion in the book. And if so, why you chose to talk about that?
It started out really just, we needed to get Ma'am out of the way so that Ada wouldn't keep pining for her, because in real life children do that even when their mothers are horrible. They want the love from that mother, and so we needed Susan to become the mother. But at the same time, the more I wrote, the more, you know, Ruth's mother started becoming important, and the idea of grandmothers started becoming important, and that was something that it took a while. I mean, it was always kind of an idea I had, but it got stronger and stronger through every draft, so that in the end, you know, in the final draft especially, you realize how much Ada is accepting that Susan is her mother, but also that she's still looking for this extended family, and at the very end she gets a grandmother, which is pretty cool, I thought. I liked that.
So cool. Speaking of Susan, actually, she might be my favorite character, actually, because I feel like we fall in love with Ada and with Maggie and with Ruth, but Susan is so interesting. While she's being the middle ground, the mediator of everything, she's growing right before our eyes, and we don't even realize because we hear so much from Ada and her perspective. And she takes care of everybody, and we learn a lot about her and her life with Becky and her life before Becky's passing. So I wanted to know if her and other characters became something you didn't expect when you wrote the first book. You mentioned you always thought about it in 2 books, but how they change throughout the story.
Oddly enough, Susan has always been one of the easiest characters I've ever had to write about.
Really?
And I don't know why that is. It's almost that she showed up in my imagination just fully formed. And yeah, I mean, I almost, she was already complicated when I knew her, but I still sort of knew instinctively what her reactions would be. It was much harder for me to write about Lady Thornton and to make her a developed character instead of somebody that was sort of stereotyped, you know, as you would sort of think you've read about this character in 16 other books. But I don't know why Susan has always been like that. I think in some ways Susan is sort of my ideal mother too. I mean, just the person that she's not perfect at all, because you wouldn't believe her if she was, but she keeps giving Ada space over and over, and just love throughout all the hard stuff. So I think she's a very honest person, but I really don't know where she came from. I just like her too. She's my favorite character that I've ever written. So. Wow,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
So you said the role of Ruth's mother was slowly growing and growing. Ruth's part of the history of the story, actually. Sorry, was it smaller when you first thought, and you just decided that it would develop, like it would mean so much more to have Ruth there and her relationship with Ada and with Maggie, and then include her family. At some point, I just thought, okay, so Ruth is a big thing, but maybe her family won't be a big thing in the book. It's just that character that never shows up.
I mean, again, through all of those different drafts, Ruth started out coming later in the story and not staying for as long, but we just liked her. I mean, I liked her, and I liked the way she interacted with Ada, and so we kept moving her up, you know, a little earlier. Let's have her show up here. If she shows up here instead of here, you have to put her in all these scenes, you know. So her role kept getting bigger, and as it did, it got more complex, and I liked that. I really like Ruth, and one of the things I'm thinking about is following Ruth over to Bletchley Park and seeing what the next part of her story is.
Ooh.
Yeah, cool. I don't know that I'll write a third book about Ada, because I'm really happy with where Ada is right now, but I might might pick up Ruth's story and go on. I'm thinking about it.
Well, actually, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we have a story about Susan and Becky, because I think it's really subtle how you introduce the relationship of them, but it's also really clear. Like, it's obvious they were a couple and they were happy and there were people against it and all of that. It's really subtle, but it's crystal clear, and I like them. Like, I like what Ada learns from Susan mentioning, and she doesn't mention Becky a lot. Just it feels like Ada picks up little things from Susan's past life, and it's just Becky's character is created out of memories, and that's really interesting. So I'd like to see those memories come to reality.
That's an interesting thing too, and I've started thinking about it a little bit. I hadn't really. You're not the first reader that has suggested that, and I hadn't really thought of it before. But you know, originally Susan's background with Becky was really to give her a point of connection with Ada, where she understood how Ada felt to be blamed for something that she had no control over, and that really wasn't something she should be blamed for. Mm-hmm. That was sort of a visceral connection that Susan and Ada would have without Ada knowing it, and because the book is always told from Ada's point of view, there's a lot of things that go right over Ada's head. So, you know, it was never the point of the book, but at the same time, I really would like children to understand, and I think that where children are going to get this is the children who are in you know, two mothers or two fathers, and you know, gay parents or gay relatives that they love, and they're going to see that this existed throughout all of history. This is not a new thing we've created. Yes. And you know, I really do believe that love is love is love. And so, yeah, there's a part of me that thinks exploring Susan and Becky would be really quite interesting.
Yes, definitely.
And to me, Becky's a very real person also. So.
That's great to hear from the author. So I remember the last time we spoke, you mentioned that the idea for Ada's history came from the evacuation of London's evacuation, and how it was something so awful to so many people, but what if it could be good to someone, right? So right, exactly. In the second book that we see, despite the freedom and safety that Ada and Jamie won with Susan and where they live now, the war gets to them anyway. They're affected by the war anyway. There's no way they couldn't. And that balance between the war brings out good things and brings out bad things. How was it to work on that balance between which situations would be actually bad and would cause them harm per se, and which ones would be also bad, obviously, but more seen as a opportunity of growth?
Right. Well, so the evacuation is a real historical thing, and that I think only England ever did that. I don't think there's anything like that in history elsewhere. But you know, so it was an interesting thing to think about how it could be a good thing for these children. But the war itself is not a good thing. Still, there really are, you know. I mean, you can't really say, well, Hitler was a good thing. I mean, that doesn't.
Yeah, that doesn't work like that.
No, but also as the war continues, I mean, as Ada's world is growing, she's going to end up seeing that it causes harm for an awful lot of people, and it just was sort of a situation of her circumstances why it was good for her. But you know, the title for the war I finally won, that's referring back to her internal war, her war within herself to try and conquer her past and kind of be a whole child again. So it's been fun for me because you can play with all the different ways that you can be at war, but I needed it to be honest historically, so I needed it still to be a hard, difficult thing. Yeah. Even, you know, for all sorts of people, it was a hard, difficult thing.
And we lost some characters on the way. I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but that was uncalled for. That was really... Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of readers are mad at me about that.
Yeah, but actually, I think I joke that it's uncalled for, but I think it's actually called for. Like, we can see how the war affects everybody, and I think it's natural to have that kind of loss at some point. I think.
Yeah, especially the people in the circumstances of that character died in such remarkable numbers. It would be more unusual to have that character not die, but I've had a lot of readers that think there's a conspiracy afoot, and then in book 3, the character magically going to walk through the door, and I keep saying, I'm sorry.
I think I saw some people on Goodreads mentioning something about that. I was like, guys, come on.
No, I'm so sorry. That was never in my mind. I mean, it just, it's just so much more likely that the people died. It was a terrible war. There were so many that died. I've been to the beach, Omaha Beach, where the Normandy invasions were, and there's an American cemetery on the cliffs right above it, and they have a whole wall that is just the names of people that they never found any trace of after D-Day. They probably were shot into the ocean, and I mean, they never found anything to bury. And it's hundreds of names, and it's just from that one day. So, it's it really was a lot, and that doesn't even, we don't even start to discuss the Holocaust yet. But, all of these people knew people that died. Everybody did.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how at the end of the book there's a little acknowledgments or notes per se. I don't remember how they were called. When you mention how by the time the story was where the story was, people were starting to realize what was the Holocaust, how complicated and how way bigger than people realized that war was. I think it was a really interesting to have that note by the end of it. Maybe some people just think, how come they're not discussing the Holocaust when this is a historical fiction? And something I thought was really interesting to see.
The truth came out gradually, and it was sort of at government levels and then more to the public. And of course, when the camps were liberated, then there were films and all of this. But the information about what was happening came out before that. So it was just unthinkable. I don't think, people expected people to be taken into camps and held, but not, massacred. So, I mean, I want to mention it in the notes so that people understood that, a lot of people really at that time didn't know what was happening. Not that we just decided not to talk about it, because I try very hard to be honest with my books.
Yes. Speaking of next books and something like that, you mentioned how creating Ada's vision and her perspective was really hard when you first started, and I actually think that's one of the best points of the book. Like, it's one of the best things about the book. She is a great main character, in my opinion, and she carries the story. Even though it's all from her perspective, we can see how you actually gives the time to each character to grow, not only from her perspective, but showing what she is missing. Like you mentioned, a lot of things go just, she doesn't even realize it. And now that perhaps the story is over, we don't know, do you think that creating the perspective, having that much trouble to create a character so unique, that there has to be mature and a little bit closed up at first, but at the same time innocent and a voice of a child, do you think that will influence your next characters and your next stories, and how so?
Probably. I'm partway through a new book, and I wrote a whole first draft and then threw it away and changed the narrative character. Pretty much dropped a whole character and created a new one. And so, but I think that learning how to do that, learning how to tell everything through Ada's eyes, but where the reader can still see where Ada is wrong or misinformed, was it was a very hard thing to learn how to do, but having learned how to do it, I hope I can use it future books. Yeah, I hope that that'll come through in my writing. I think I'm a better writer because of these 2 books, and that pisses me a lot. It would be sad to go through all that work and not be a better kind of depressing.
No, I think it's clear. Like when you read the story, I can see that it's not just Ada that matures. I can see that there's an actual concern to pace the development of each character and to give more space to all of them, because at first Susan, again back to Susan because why not? Yeah. We get a lot of her perspective of it, and in this book I can see Susan's perspective. I can see how she's a whole character and not just a character that's there to help Ada and help Jamie. She's a whole person, and by the end of the book we see more and more of that, and I think that has a lot to do with the writing that you created. And
Ada also realizing that she's a person and not this, stick figure. But most people are very complicated, and I think seeing anybody as all good or all bad does everybody a disservice, because then you think, well, if you see this little bad thing, they must be all bad, but that's never true. So it was fun to write about revision 7. I was
well, there were 9, so.
But then we picked it back up again, and there's something really nice about feeling like in the end you got to the place where you wanted to be, and if it took 9 drafts, then that was good to have 9 drafts. It's much better to have a good book
with 9 drafts than 1. There's a question from someone in the chat here. It's called Anna, and she's asking if Ada forgives her mom actually, as a daughter or as a mother in the future. What do you think? You think that's the path of forgiveness? I think that's a big discussion in the book, actually, how Ada feels not only just with mom per se, but how she feels about Jamie calling Susan mom. Throughout the book, I was always waiting for a reaction from him, seeing what she would do when Jamie called Susan mom and mom again. What do you think?
Right. Well, I think that I don't know so much about forgiveness, because in my mind, forgiveness is a two-way street. Somebody asks forgiveness and then you give it. But I think that what Susan or what Ada comes to is being able to set down her anger and not let it affect her anymore, and say, this is what happened and that can't be changed. And maybe there were things broken in my mother where she couldn't be my mother, but maybe I really just think it's more of a setting down and deciding I'm not going to let this affect my life moving forward, because I think for forgiveness you would need ma'am to have some sort of sorrow or change or something. So I don't like to throw around the word forgiveness that much, other than to just say that you can decide to not let it affect the rest of your life, and I think that's what Ada does.
Cool.
And decide to be glad that you're with people that love you now.
There's another question. Actually, I think it connects somehow with this question as well. Victoria is asking if you have any similarities or resemblances with Ada, and maybe we can expand that. How you feel about forgiveness is different from Ada. Do you think that there are other feelings with some situations that you put your own perspective on Ada? I think all characters are a group of different things, and I think you mentioned the last time that every author puts a little bit of yourself and some other people in all the characters in all the books. But
without a doubt. But yes, I mean there are certainly some similarities between Ada and I, and they're not obvious ones. I don't have a club foot. I didn't get a cabinet, but I know where they are, and so that makes it easier for me to write about it and see her perspective. I mean, you can change all the physical things, but keep the emotional truth and use that as a writer. And that's something I've done with parts of Ada's story. So again, I think it's the same thing as, I mean, that's something I believe for myself too, that Forgiveness is one thing, and you can give it or not give it, but also just setting something down is another thing, and saying, okay, we're going to move forward now. We're not going to keep hanging on to this.
We mentioned about the title in Portuguese, The Word That Taught Me How to Live. And I also think it was a great translation. I think it went really well with the main message of the book, if I may say so, that is about grief and mourning. A lot of the book, there's a lot of grief and mourning, or not a lot of grief, and the difference between Jamie's and Ada's reaction with Mom and the other characters and the other situations that happened that I'm not going to spoil to the people who haven't read it yet. But I just wanted to know, how was it for you to write about grief? That's something so universal. We all have to deal with it at some point, but it's also so personal. Everybody handles it in some way, and there's one character, I'm not going to name it, but she has to deal with grief in such a strong way, and I can see the stages of grief. And I like how you discussed it, like she has her own way, and like the stages of grief that we know, but Ada has a way, and Jamie has a way, and Susan with Becky and everything. So I don't think that there's a wrong way. Yes. Well, there probably is a wrong way, but there are a lot of right ways. There are many different ways that you can grieve that are correct. So I don't like to say people to say, oh, this person wasn't really sad because they didn't, put the cloth to their head and weep for 10 days. I mean, it's just it's a long-term process, and the people that I've grieved for and about have all been different to me. So I think that everybody's point of view is going to be different there, and I try to say that, but I think there are some people too that have really just hit super hard, and the character that you were alluding to is one of them. I don't know. I lay your eggs in one basket or something. Yeah, I think that I tried to figure out what would be the main thing in this book. Like in the first book, we can see a lot of overcoming and having a liberty and being someone else, that kind of vibe. And I tried to figure out the one in this book. And to me, what stands out is the grieving part, and the development of Ada. What I mentioned in the first question is becoming a child again and having that role as a child. Yeah, I think that it's grieving and also healing from the grief. I think that I think it's very common in children that are in difficult situations that they have to act too grown up too fast, and I think that's a really scary thing. And so I think you feel much more secure when you're allowed to be the age you really are, and not have to be responsible for the world. So, I hope that's what we get, is that it gets to be a herself. Kid. Yeah, and actually be herself. Now that you said that, like, she has to have her own personality despite the pain, and despite being the girl with the club foot. Wow, now you just said it, being herself, and I'm like, oh my god. That's a whole new thing. I spent a whole long time with this one. There's a question from Karina, and she asks what had Ada become, not Ada, sorry, Mom, be such a hard and cold and closed up person with Ada and Jamie, like why she had no love feelings towards Ada, apparently. What do you think that is? There's two things. One thing is that I never wanted to give her an excuse, so I never said, this is why Ma'am is so awful, so everyone went, oh, she couldn't help it. Because the truth is, we could help it. And even if you have, horrible things happen to you, you don't get to treat everybody else badly because of it. I mean, that's just not, it's not right. And so, Ma'am was in the wrong, and I didn't want to give her excuses. But the other thing is really that Ada only sees her through Ada's eyes, and so there's probably things Ada misses and doesn't know about her mother's background. It doesn't, that don't affect her
So I imagine that Madam's life was pretty difficult, but I didn't go too far into it because
sometimes people are just they just don't know how to deal with things, right?
Yeah, but and I wish that people weren't terrible, but they really are. I mean, I did a lot of research for this book, and you know, there are much worse things than what happened to Ada that happened to children, and it shouldn't be true, but it is true. So, and I've had kids come up to me and tell me, you know, at schools that they had a hard time.
Actually, some people in the chat were talking about children in the Syrian war, actually, and you always written children's books, right? Is
Yes.
that something you're interested in writing more like more recent events, like the children's situation in Syria, or the shooting in schools, or is it something that you're looking forward to write more about what's actually happening in the world, or like you did with
I think that, I mean, the Syrian situation I would love to write about. Or some other modern situations I think would be very interesting. Probably not the school shootings.
That's a really complicated.
I mean, yeah, my children are older now, but you know, some of these things happened when they were in high school, and the idea of trying to go to a school and hope your children walk out is, I just don't even I don't even want to write that. I have to spend, you know, a year or two with whatever story I'm writing, and there are places I don't want to go, and that would be one of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I would like to. Yeah, the whole Syrian refugee crisis is something that I find interesting. So
that would be really interesting, actually.
A lot of stories.
So we talked about when you discussed that your main issue, like maybe the hardest part of writing the first book, was finding Ada's perspective. What would be the hardest part in this book, in The War I Finally Won?
Pretty much the hardest part was tying all the scenes together. I mean, we went back and forth. Like I said, we moved Ruth, you know, from here to here, and we some of the other events earlier and later and earlier, and there was one big chunk of plot that I just threw out entirely. But I mean, it stayed in for like 6 drafts, and then I decided, we probably don't want that to happen, so we took that out. So it was really more of the puzzle thing, because I already knew Ada's voice, and I knew the sort of issues we wanted to talk about, but it was just how to talk about them, and you know, what happened each day. And that was the biggest part.
But when you first wrote, now that you mentioned, it starts with the story happened 4 years ago, and did you already know how it would finish? Like, did you know all the characters that would not be in the ending, or even though you had 9 drafts, like, was the ending close to what you thought?
I knew emotionally how it would finish, but not which people where.
Okay.
That was a little different. Yeah.
That's cute.
It was a big complicated mess. I'm guessing I threw out 1,000 pages of writing.
Really?
Like, yeah.
Oh boy. Well, it turned out really well. Like, we have like both books have around 600 pages. So.
In the English editions, they have 400, but it might. It always depends on how big the words are.
Yes, I think in our edition we have around 277 in the second book and close to 300 in the first book. So something about that.
Yeah, this is 385.
Whoa! And
that's pretty big.
Yeah. And how do you feel the reception's been in the? Yeah, you mentioned that we and England were the only ones that had the imprint already, but what's the feedback been like in the U.S.? And the U.S. launched last year, right? The book released last year.
U.S. launched on October 3rd.
Okay.
And we debuted at number 3 on the New York Times bestselling list, so that was pretty cool.
Congrats.
Thank you. And yeah, the reception's been very good in the United States. It's been quite good in England. I haven't seen sales figures for England, but the reviews have been good. The reviews for the United States were very good. So we got reviewed in the New York Times too. I'm all over the New York Times suddenly. That's a new thing. I've never been.
Well, you won the Newbery, so I think the New York Times.
Yeah. They pay a little more attention, but they just gave it. I didn't win any awards for this one, but it doesn't. You know, that's
not the point, right?
No, it's not the point. And yeah, it's sold. We've sold it in a number of different languages that just haven't caught up to them yet. Yeah. So that's neat.
Well, the official book release here was actually the book date, release date thing was 2 days ago, actually, on Monday. So
I know because my Twitter feed turned Portuguese.
Oh so. Yeah, I'm sorry. We love Twitter. Like
no, I absolutely love it. I felt very loved.
We have a question from actually a friend of mine, Beyond, and he is asking about your writing process. We discussed a little bit in the first live stream that we did, but if you don't mind, he asks if you write on paper or a little bit about your writing process. Do you outline on paper or it's all computer? Like 9 drafts is all computer thing, but
this is the book I'm working on now. This is a lot of different printouts of different versions because I told you I had one whole version that I threw away, but some of this is that. And over here, this is some of yesterday's work.
Oh. So you just print it a lot while you write? Like you just go...
Yeah, I write on the computer, but then I print every day because I'm always afraid the computer is going to catch fire or something. And I back it up a bunch of different times. And I'll just keep doing this. And I also have here on the desk, this is a file which has a lot of the notes for the books that I'm writing now. And
this is your Pinterest in real life, like.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a calendar with notes on it, and it had all these sticky notes on it. Right here. This is some more of that. And then I have this stack of note cards right here. This is research material. I put them in little note cards.
Only for this book that you're writing right now.
Only for the book I'm writing right now. Yeah, I have piles like this for every.
And you've written 17.
Yeah. So I'm very messy.
It looks really organized, actually.
Yeah, but it's almost always on the computer. I sometimes write by hand, but mostly because I had a good idea and I'm not near my computer. I type faster than I write, so I'm better at typing. And I have a laptop if I need to somewhere else.
Okay, so we have a couple last questions, so we can start moving on to the giveaway. And yeah, so we're giving away 2 books. Let me just say this in Portuguese so people can catch up. Então, gente, a gente tá quase no final. Vocês podem mandar mais perguntas aí. O Fox tá mandando as perguntas aqui pra mim. Muito obrigada. Todo mundo tá mandando. E a gente vai sortear 2 kits de parceiro com o livro. Não é só o livro, é o kitzinho de parceiro, que nem os parceiros da Dark vão mandar. E continuem mandando a mensagem que o Fox falou. Você só precisa mandar uma vez. Cada pessoa mandando a mensagem uma vez já tá elegível pra concorrer. E aí eu vou anunciar aqui. E então vamos lá. Mais algumas perguntinhas. Corram aí pra mandar pra vocês. So, next question is from Yara, who's also a friend of mine who's watching here, and she says, in the first book, we see Ada learn a lot about love and family, and she asks if those bonds are stronger in the second book, and I think so, but what do you think that Ada's life has for her in the second book? I think maybe she also wants to know after the second book. I think all readers finish a story or a series or a duology in this case, and we wonder, did they get married? Did they start they have a farm with a lot of horses? And what about Butter? And what about Oban? And like,
I mean, I have my own ideas, and in my mind, somebody wrote me one time after the first book, and they said they put something up online, and it was something like today is Ada's 84th birthday. And I thought, oh, that's fantastic. And so I wrote a whole little blog post of what Ada was like on her 84th birthday. And, I sort of see my characters living beyond the book. I don't know that I'll write about it, but, but I see them growing up and becoming adults and it all ends well for them.
Yeah.
There's all the sad things that happen, but I think they come out okay.
Did you post that on your blog? Because we can.
It is on my blog. It's a pretty old post. You'd have to go searching.
We can do that. We can do that. We'll look that up and post to everybody here so they can read it as well. Absolutely. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Actually, there was a follow-up comment from Yada from the question that she asked. She says, I can't handle that girl suffering so much. Please tell me that she doesn't suffer so much.
Well, one thing I always promise people is the butter does not die.
Yes.
All sorts of people were worried I was going to kill butter in the second. Here's a funny thing, too. There's the colic scene in the book where a horse is very, very sick.
Yes, that was scary.
Yeah, well, I wrote it, and that was something that stuck around from one of the very original drafts, that scene. But afterward, I live on a farm, and I have two friends whose horses live on my farm, and one of them colicked, and he was at work. We couldn't reach him. We couldn't reach the vet, and this other young girl and I spent the whole afternoon keeping that horse alive, walking him and kicking him and shouting at him, and until the vets could get there, and he ended up living. But at the very end of this very long day, we were sitting in the barn, and I said to my friend, I said, just so you know, when you read my book, I wrote the scene for today.
Oh, I was about to ask if the scene was inspired on that live event.
Well, I mean, it's exactly what can happen, and horses colic a lot, but it was almost identical to what
yes.
Instead of winter.
Oh my!
It was just crazy close. So I said, I just want you to know I'm not reading your book.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
So a couple more people asked about what you think Ada's life has saved for her after the second book. And I think that's something that happens a lot. Like, we wonder where the characters go and what will happen. Do you feel like you mentioned writing more about Ruth, maybe Susan? Fingers crossed. I'm hoping for it. But do you feel you've told the story? It's done. No third book.
Well,
you can never say never.
I don't want a bad book.
Okay.
But if I follow Ruth, I think Ada would still be in there. And as I said, I'm going to Israel, and I think I told you that when we were talking earlier privately. Yeah. But I'm going to Israel in a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of interested in what it was like right after World War II in Israel, and I could see both Ada and Ruth having some role there. So. Yeah, we're just gonna keep thinking.
Maybe a cameo from Ada, but something from Ruth's point of view.
Yeah, or even from a different character that had both of them in the background. So we'll see.
Interesting. that kind of comment, like, we'll see. It keeps us waiting for years, but that's okay.
But unfortunately, it will be years because I write slow and I've got this other thing going here. So. This is not about Ada. This is a new book.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about it?
It's set around the discovery of King Tut's tomb. So it's about the discovery of King Tut's tomb.
Oh, cool.
Kind of. I mean, it's about the boy that helped discover the tomb.
Children are everywhere. There was a line, a comment in the chat from Gabriella, and I think that's really nice of her to say so. I think I wanted you to hear. She asked me to tell you that we love what you talk about, what you said, what you discussed on the book, actually. Such a serious and important topic discussed in such a lovely way so children can read it and grow up as a person and grew up to be better people. So I just wanted you to know that message. And we have a lot of love for you and Butter on the chat here. It's in Portuguese still, but later on I'll subtitle this live stream so you can read it all. I'll subtitle in Portuguese and English and try to do my best so you can keep up with everything. But Anna is also saying that she thinks it's beautiful to see how Ada learns to trust despite everything else that happened. And like you said, I think she's a great character that develops such a great way. And what's funny to me actually to see was Jamie came out of the blue, and I saw him grew up, and before I knew, he was grown up and a farmer and interested in stuff and had his own thing. It was so cool to see that. I mean, he you know, the attention's not on him for a while, but he does grow up quite a bit and kind of has his own path. So I'm very glad. There's a comment from Ava here, not Ada, Ava. And she says that The War That Saved My Life is a book that I want to pass along to my children, no doubt. And she asked me to ask you if you thought that it would have so many fans in Brazil, if the story would grow so much to be read in so many countries and there'd be so much love around it. No, I have. This is the first book that I have had that's really been published in so many different places, and it's fantastic to me. It means an awful lot to me that the story can be universal and the characters can be universal. And you know, Brazil, but you know, it's sold in Japan and China and Greece and Poland and the Netherlands. So it's there's a pirated version in Iran also, and I get emails from Iranian school children in Persian that are reading a copy that is completely illegal. But it's really nice. I mean, it's fantastic that you can write something that everyone understands, because it's about the heart. So that's really cool. It's great. Okay, I think we're ready for the giveaway. Okay, great. So you don't even have the book there. I wish the book got to you already, but I don't have the copies yet. I have the first one. Well, you have the first one, right? So it's as beautiful as the first one. I can assure you. I've seen the pictures. Yeah, it looks beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. It's the prettiest book. It's actually some of the prettiest, I think, Darkside's made in the last few months, I think. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to Portuguese so we can do this. Então, gente, vamos lá pro sorteio. O Fox ainda vai pegar algumas das perguntas, se vocês tiverem mais alguma. Mas vamos lá, o sorteio vão ser 2 kits, mais uma vez, avisando vocês. E primeira pessoa é a Anabela. Anabela com 2 N's. Ana, manda uma mensagem aqui só para confirmar que você viu. Congratulations! Yeah! Manda uma mensagem aqui só pra você ver que você viu, que você tá aqui também. E a gente pegar o seu contato, manda o seu contato pra gente. So that's the first one. And we have a second one. Let's just see if Anna's still here. Let me see if there's any more questions. I forgot to tell you the keyword that they have to post in order to be eligible to the giveaway is Invincible Kim. Thank you. Please come to Brazil. That's fantastic. I would love to come to Brazil. Yes, very much. Okay, so we have Anna, and she's one of the winners. Ana, não esquece de mandar o contato. Manda seu e-mail ou manda seu Twitter aqui e a gente vai falar contigo. Next one. Gabriel Mota is the second winner. Gabriela Mota, actually. Actually, there were 2 people who asked questions, so that's awesome. People who were engaged. Very good. Yes! E, pessoal, quem não tá sabendo também, quem não viu aí no chat, a gente tem um código de desconto para comprar o livro na Amazon. Quem quiser, usa Guerra 10. Tá aqui na descrição todos os termos, o link direto para comprar o livro também. Então aproveitem para comprar o livro, só vai ficar até alguns dias esse código. E aproveitem porque a história tá linda. Pra mim é o segundo ainda melhor do que o primeiro e é maravilhoso e eu tô muito feliz de estar falando isso aqui com a Coquinha, tô nervosíssima, quase chorando aqui. So I'm just letting them know that we have a discount code given by Darkside to purchase in Amazon that gives 10% off buying the book if they were here in the live stream watching. So yeah, so 2 people want the book and more people can have the book with the discount. That's awesome. So Kim, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it, and like I said, I love the book, and I was really happy when Darkside invited me to chat with you again because I think it's really a universal story. I think a lot of people can relate to it, and there were moments in the book that were so emotional to me and so interesting to read. So thank you very much for the book and taking the time. And I'm cheering up a little bit, sorry.
Well, thank you very much for having me again. I very much enjoyed talking to you last time and this time also. And I'm so glad that my book can reach readers in Brazil.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Woo, so. Teared up a little bit here. Sorry. You'll see that later.
It's very good. Very good.
Oh, before I forget, there's one more thing. There are 2 people having their birthdays today. So, congratulations. Happy birthday to Wes, who talked to me on Instagram, and Jessica as well. I'm going to say that in Portuguese. Wes e Jéssica, vocês estão fazendo aniversário hoje. Vocês falaram comigo no Instagram e falaram que iam tirar um tempinho do aniversário de vocês pra estar aqui. Muito, muito obrigada. Parabéns pra vocês. Muito amor pra todos vocês. Feliz aniversário. I promised I would give them happy birthday.
That's all I need to learn more Portuguese.
Well, we have obrigado, which is pretty easy. That's thanks. And happy birthday is feliz aniversário.
Feliz aniversário.
Yeah, that's great. See, no difficulties to speak Portuguese. You can already come to Brazil. That's all we say. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can wrap this up. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me and Kim. This has been lovely. The live stream will be saved here on the channel. It will be subtitled in English and Portuguese. And hopefully you have more books published in Brazil so we can discuss a little bit more about them.
I will hope that very much. And thank you, Ty, for translating.
Yes! Ty, muito, muito obrigada por traduzir tudo isso e por acompanhar aqui. Quem não conseguiu acompanhar, gente, relaxa, que vai ter a tradução depois aqui tudinho, vai ter todas as legendas e tudo mais. Talvez uns posts e outras coisas mais pra frente. É isso aí, gente. Muito obrigada. Obrigada, Darkside, que tornou essa live possível, que publicou o livro, que trouxe a Kim aqui pra conversar com a gente. Obrigada do fundo do meu coração. Não esqueça de mandar o comando aí da Darkside também pra mostrar que os fãs da caveirinha estão aqui. E é isso, gente. Boa noite e até a próxima. Thank you, Kim. That's a wrap for today. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.